Good morning and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today is July 9th, 2026, and we'll be looking closely at current events unfolding in East Asia.
Good morning. It's a critical time to be analyzing these shifts calmly and objectively.
It really is. And before we begin, we should mention that today's Deep Dive is brought to you by our sponsor, ProWave AI, and is generated by Stylo News, which is an AI-powered news application.
Right, and for those who might not know, Stylo News is actually the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software.
Exactly. The same software designed for enterprise operations, for government, military, and corporate use.
Yeah, which is a fantastic resource. It means that you, listening right now, have unique access to a tool designed specifically to support global decision makers.
Spot on. So, utilizing those very tools, we've compiled a massive stack of recent intelligence estimates and news reports. Today's focus is titled North Korea, Nuclear Signals, Naval Expansion, and the Russia Connection.
And our mission here is to just step back from the typical sensational headlines. We want to calmly map out the primary patterns of events, the actual impacts at local and international levels, and, examine the different perspectives neutrally.
Right. We're not here to generate fear. We're here to deliver facts. And to establish a baseline reality, we need to acknowledge that diplomatic and economic sanctions over the past 30 years they've largely failed to halt Pyongyang's ambitions.
They have. The objective data shows North Korea now possesses an estimated 60 warheads alongside ICBMs capable of reaching the continental U.S.
Which fundamentally changes the diplomatic calculus for everybody.
It does. The era of simply trying to prevent a nuclear North Korea has transitioned. Global decision makers are now calculating courses of action based on the reality of existing capabilities.
Right. And to understand this new reality, we have to look at the recent legal changes.
Yeah.
Because in May of 2026, North Korea passed constitutional amendments that officially cement nuclear weapons as the core of their national defense.
Yes, and crucially, they instituted a decentralized nuclear command structure.
Now, when you say decentralized command, that sounds highly volatile. Does that make a launch more likely due to a potential miscalculation?
Well, it certainly introduces new risks, but from a purely strategic perspective, it's designed as a deterrent. It's a message to the U.S. and South Korea that a decapitation strike, targeting leadership, won't stop a nuclear response.
Right. It's like a dead man's switch.
Exactly. It mathematically guarantees retaliation, which theoretically dissuades preemptive action against the regime.
And they coupled this with a rhetorical shift, right? During a Central Committee session in late June, Kim Jong-un officially removed the goal of reunification with South Korea from their constitution entirely.
That is a massive doctrinal shift. For decades, reunification was the stated ultimate goal. Removing it effectively labels South Korea as a permanent foreign adversary.
Right. So how does that actually change the facts on the ground for, say, military planners?
It shifts the likely zones of friction. It's what analysts call a coercive deterrence strategy. By taking a massive peninsula-wide invasion off the table, the immediate focus shifts to localized volatile provocations along the DMZ or the maritime borders.
Okay, so they feel their nuclear status gives them cover to engage in smaller conventional skirmishes without triggering a full-scale war.
Precisely. And speaking of the maritime borders, we have to look at the new hardware developments, which are significant.
Yeah, this is where the intelligence really highlights a pivot. We typically think of North Korea as a land-based military, heavily reliant on artillery. But Kim Jong-un recently commissioned a new 5,000-ton nuclear-capable destroyer.
The Chohaeon.
Right, the Chohaeon at the Namfo port. And they've announced a program to build 2 or more similar or larger warships every year.
Including ambitions for 10,000-ton strategic guided missile cruisers. They are explicitly using U.S. and South Korean submarine cooperation to politically justify this rapid naval buildup.
Which is an attempt to build a blue water navy, right?
Yeah.
Ships that can operate out in the open ocean.
Yes. But we should also maintain perspective here. Building a 10,000-ton cruiser requires flawless engineering and massive resources.
Right, and the intelligence reports do note several recent test failures.
They do.
There was a report of an anti-aircraft gun barrel failing during a test, which injured officers. So the question is, how credible is this naval threat in the near term?
In the very near term, their operational impact is limited by constraints in crew training and sensor integration. A ship is only as good as the radar and the crew running it. But the trend line is what concerns allied planners.
Because it complicates defense strategies.
Exactly. Transitioning from static land bases to sea-based platforms fundamentally changes the geometry of regional missile defense. A ship or submarine is much harder to track than a mountain tunnel, giving Pyongyang a more survivable second strike option.
Okay, but this brings up the most pressing question. If North Korea is heavily sanctioned, how are they financing 10,000-ton cruisers?
That requires looking at their current geopolitical alignments, specifically with Russia and China.
Right. The Russia connection here it's really the engine of this new capability. The reports confirm North Korea has sent over 100 KN-23 and KN-24 ballistic missiles to Russia for use in Ukraine.
Yes. And tragically, over 7,000 North Korean soldiers have reportedly died fighting alongside Russian forces.
But in return, it's not just cash changing hands. It's a massive technological exchange.
It's a feedback loop of real-world combat data. When these missiles are used in Ukraine, Russia gathers immense telemetry data, how the guidance systems perform against Western jamming, the terminal velocity, the failure points.
And they're feeding that data right back to Pyongyang.
Exactly. And the results are stark. By April 2026, North Korea used this data to improve the accuracy of these missiles from a roughly 1-kilometer margin of error down to an astonishing 1 to 5 meters.
Wow, from a kilometer to 1 to 5 meters. That is, that completely changes the threat profile for specific targets in Seoul or Tokyo.
It does. And alongside this combat data, Pyongyang is receiving grain, energy supplies, and, highly likely, the advanced technological assistance required for their naval expansion.
And then we have China's role in this. In a recent June summit between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un, the topic of denuclearization was notably excluded from the discussions.
Which is widely interpreted as a tacit acceptance of North Korea's nuclear status by Beijing.
Though the intelligence also suggests Beijing is a bit uneasy with this new Russia dynamic, right?
Yes, because it diminishes China's leverage. Historically, Beijing was Pyongyang's primary economic lifeline. This new robust pipeline to Moscow gives Kim Jong-un unprecedented strategic autonomy.
So if two veto-wielding UN Security Council members are actively or tacitly helping North Korea, via these massive shadow fleets evading sanctions, does that mean international sanctions are effectively obsolete?
It certainly indicates that the current sanctions regime is severely compromised. North Korea has essentially transitioned from being a dependent client state to a strategic asset for both Russia and China.
Right, which fundamentally alters how the U.S. and its allies have to respond. Let's pivot to that allied response, starting with South Korea.
South Korea is undertaking a significant military shift in response to North Korea deploying new 240-millimeter rocket launchers.
Which have a 90-kilometer range now, right?
Yes, which puts much more of South Korea at risk. In response, Defense Minister Ahn Gaibak announced a plan to lean heavily into asymmetric drone warfare.
The Drone Warriors Initiative.
Right, training 500,000 personnel and producing 60,000 drones by 2029.
And notably, using strictly non-Chinese components for supply chain security.
Exactly. It's a pragmatic, cost-effective countermeasure. Instead of building massive, expensive counter-battery systems, they plan to use highly maneuverable drones to neutralize those rocket launchers.
And diplomatically, we're seeing shifts as well. At the G7 summit in Evian, France, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung and U.S. President Donald Trump discussed what they are calling a phased approach.
Yes, and it's important to analyze this neutrally as a policy evolution. Historically, the strategy has often centered on maximum pressure, demanding immediate denuclearization.
Right. Total disarmament before any concessions.
But this phased approach focuses first on halting the production of new nuclear material and freezing missile development.
Basically stopping the bleeding first.
Correct. It's a pragmatic acknowledgement of the current environment, prioritizing a freeze in capabilities over holding out for immediate, complete denuclearization.
Okay, so while this international balancing act is happening, what is going on internally in North Korea? They recently announced the 20 by 10 regional development policy.
Right, which is an ambitious 10-year plan. The goal is to modernize industrial facilities in 20 different regions annually.
Which is a big shift from their usual Pyongyang-centric focus, right? They usually pour everything into the capital.
It is a significant shift, and they are using military engineering units to build these civilian facilities.
So why the sudden focus on regional development?
It builds resilience. By decentralizing their industry, they harden the country's infrastructure against potential targeted strikes, making the nation much harder to paralyze economically.
It integrates the military directly into local economies, too.
Yes, it creates internal cohesion, subsidized by the resources they are acquiring from Russia.
Now, all of this, the nuclear entrenchment, the naval builds, the Russia alliance, it's having massive ripple effects globally. The consensus around nuclear non-proliferation is visibly fracturing.
We are seeing a distinct domino effect in the intelligence reports. Because of combined threats from Russia and Iran, nations like Lithuania are actively reconsidering their stance on nuclear armament.
And in Japan, the Conservative Party is now publicly demanding open debates on nuclear policy.
Which is profound, given Japan's history. It shows how fundamentally the security landscape has shifted.
Right. Even Israel is reportedly shifting from its traditional policy of nuclear ambiguity toward a posture of selective disclosure to explicitly enhanced deterrence.
The underlying takeaway for many global actors watching Pyongyang is that possessing nuclear weapons guarantees state survival.
And this anxiety is clearly reflecting in public sentiment. We analyzed recent data from X, formerly Twitter, and the sentiment is predominantly negative, alarmed, and highly focused on the military threat.
Right, frequently drawing parallels between North Korea's new posture and Iran's regional actions.
Though, it is worth noting, the data also captures some fringe defensive posts from anti-imperialist accounts, framing North Korea's actions as justified self-defense. But overall, the mainstream conversation is heavily concerned.
Very concerned, especially regarding the G7 actions against North Korea's Unit 180.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unit 180. For listeners who might not track cyber warfare closely, Unit 180 is North Korea's elite cyber division.
They are essentially responsible for massive state-sponsored cryptocurrency thefts around the world.
Which sparked widespread online discussion recently. Because this isn't just about distant geopolitics. This directly impacts global financial systems. They are actively utilizing digital piracy to fund this exact military and naval expansion we've been discussing.
It is a highly sophisticated illicit funding mechanism.
So just to synthesize all these data points, we are looking at a North Korea that has constitutionally locked in its nuclear status. They are building a blue water naval deterrent. They are successfully exchanging munitions for advanced Russian telemetry, and China is tacitly accepting the new status quo.
Exactly. The global consensus is slowly shifting from preventing a nuclear North Korea to managing and surviving in a world where a nuclear North Korea is a permanent fixture.
Which brings us to the likely future events to watch for. What should our listeners be keeping an eye on in the coming months?
Well, we should expect continued localized provocations near the DMZ, further tests of maritime platforms like the Chohai, and increasing integration between Russian and North Korean military technologies.
Right. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd love for you to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought based on everything we've analyzed today.
I think the most critical question to ponder is this. If North Korea is currently surviving and even advancing its technology by directly intertwining itself with conflicts in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, how long until other isolated regimes adopt this exact same blueprint?
That is a very serious question.
It is. Are we entering an era where regional borders simply no longer contain regional threats? Because the blueprint for bypassing sanctions via global conflict participation is currently succeeding.
A sobering reality to consider, and exactly why we need objective, fact-based analysis right now. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack all this today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, the listener, for tuning in to our conversation. Remember, you can take control of your own intelligence gathering with Stylo News. It's a mobile and computer app that you can download and customize for personal intelligence-style briefs pulled from hundreds of traditional news sources and X.
It really is a powerful way to stay ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. We encourage you to subscribe to Stylo News, where you can get AI-powered news on demand. Just head over to www.stylonews.com.
And please feel free to reach out with any topics you'd like us to cover in future deep dives.
We love hearing your suggestions, so be sure to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms for updates. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your day.